Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and DC Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. Hi, welcome. Today we are here in the studio with Kyndell Harkness, and she is the first head of culture and community at the Minnesota Star Tribune. And so, Kyndell, it's great to have you, number one. And number two, I want to understand what that first ever culture and community role is, because you have such a really interesting background as a photojournalist, really affected by George Floyd and some of the efforts to integrate news media and sort of make it more more relevant and more responsive in the wake of George Floyd. So
Wow.
I feel like all that snowballs into what you're doing now. Can you tell us what's going on?
Yeah. You're right. I was a photographer, then a photo editor, and um, and so I was a photo editor during Floyd, but I had been asking for a different role for myself.
Mhm.
Just trying to figure out ways that, like, I was looking at as a visual journalist, you tend to be at the epicenter of what's happening in a newsroom.
Mm.
You talk to all sorts of different kinds of people, and you have to collaborate over all sorts of different desks. And so, in doing so, like, I could hear the same complaints about things or the same issues that keep on coming up to the surface. And so I was like, I feel like I could help with that, but I'm not exactly sure. Like, this is not a job that we have. And so I was trying to build something that was sort of coalition building just for the newsroom.
Mhm.
And then they were like, not interested. And then Floyd happened. And then they're like, that seems like a good idea.
Let's rethink that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's rethink that. And so, there were sort of like fundamental concerns that journalists were having in the newsroom. Like, how do we hire? Is there transparency around that? Like, how do we take care of our young people? How do we do
Mhm.
learning, right? In a newsroom? Like, what does that look like? And uh and so, like, looking through that with a belonging equity lens, you can do those things that actually help everyone grow. And so, we created all these committees to sort of tackle this stuff, and to the point of where we had, like, I don't know, probably more than a third of the newsroom volunteering on some kind of committee for something.
Wow. That's a
Um,
huge uptake. Like people
yeah,
must have been really starving for that kind of connection and coalition building, as you say.
yeah. Because I mean, I think, we were so isolated by COVID, and we were already siloed to begin with.
Yeah.
so like so like being able to, and how do you pass on knowledge from generation to generation? So what does that look like? So, we intentionally built, I should say I intentionally built the committees around making sure that they're all different kinds of people in them, so that they could have a chance to talk to each other. So, like, there's always these, like, third or fourth reasons to do this work. And so I did that for 2 years, and then we had a new publisher come in, and, first week on the job, he had something where a cartoon ran that was sort of, like, not good, kinda got some community members upset,
Mhm.
and I'm like, "It's his 3rd day on the job," like, so I just said, "Hey, if you want help navigating this, just let me know." And so, like, I gave him some advice around it, and he's like, "Well, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I do this thing." He's like, "What is that?"
That's never
And
good when your new boss is like, "What do you do again?"
what are you doing? What's like? So I told him about the committees and the structure and what I was trying to do and sort of the overall vision. And he was just like, "Can you do that for the entire company? Like, I feel like I need something like that company wide." And so that turned into like building this like head of culture and community role, and it really is an internal and external role.
Mhm,
Like, what I'm doing with it is that I'm building structures, building points of contact, internally so that people can get together, like-minded people can work on solutions for things. And so that could be the employee resource groups where you have BIPOC group, an
mhm,
accessibilities group, a women's group, where they are able to do programming and to educate people, but also like gather together to talk about the issues that are uniquely theirs.
mhm.
And then there are other things, like we started town halls, and so those they were running every 6 weeks, and now they're very quarterly, and so, like, how many different ways can, like, the upper part of the company be as transparent about what's happening, especially with things that are moving pretty quickly,
Right.
and, like, the structure for committees is kind of interesting. And then the other part is like how does the Star Tribune as a whole connect with community? And that's the external piece.
Mhm,
And so like um what are the touches where we're doing some sort of like real listening um, and sort of real relationship building that feels authentic and that we're not like just inviting people into our ivory tower
right.
to talk down to them. This is like, can we go to these communities and be in a space of being humble and being curious, which is what journalism is supposed to be about.
It is, and I definitely wanna get to the external piece because, you pioneered a really interesting set of listening circles throughout the state, but
Yeah.
I was thinking as you were talking about building those systems for people to work collaboratively on big issues, the many other companies have done that for a really long time, and
Mhm,
news media as sort of as, like, if you look at news media companies,
mhm.
you don't hear a lot about the ERGs. You don't hear the employee resource groups. You don't
Oh yeah.
hear about like, oh, we're working across divisions and departments on this big issue. Why do you think that is?
Because because the mission is the most important thing. Like, journalists don't get into journalism just because it's a job. It's a
Mhm,
calling, it's a mission. Like, we understand the greater good. And so anything that comes in the way of that mission feels like extra, right?
mm.
Like, it doesn't
You could
feel
be out
as
covering a story.
right. What are you doing wasting this time? And it feels like you have to give folks permission in order to do this kind of work. And so
Mhm,
it really has to come from the top. You know, the editor at the time, Suki Dardarian, and even Renee Sanchez um, understood, especially after Floyd, that we needed to find different ways to connect. And so, like, having that conversation about that importance and just like doing the work, like, we have a public safety committee. And so,
mhm.
like, what do we do around like mugshot policies and
Yeah,
the use of scanner stuff? Like, who's responsible for like making those rules and thinking about that? And so, um, it's right for a committee from all across the newsroom, not just the public safety folks, but you'll have issues with in sports with a player who gets arrested for something dumb or
right.
like, so all the entire newsroom touches that in some way. And then if you're working the shift on the weekend, you'll have like people, there's always rotating shifts on the weekends.
Mhm.
So so you'll have other folks who are having to deal with that work. And so how do we educate them So, like, I
Yeah, like,
just
how do
think
you
that
work as a unit? I mean, and I think
yeah.
in some ways, journalists are such lone wolves, like, they're out there, they're getting their own scoops, but you're not a collection of independent journalists or freelancers, like, you're connected by a mission, and you
Mhm.
have to all be on the same page about, like, okay, how are what language are you using in these stories? How are we approaching our communities? How can we repair harm where there's
Mhm.
been harm historically, which is huge in the industry.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like that's work that is ongoing. And I love how you were talking about how you kind of designed the diversity of those committees. And
Yeah.
I mean, at heart, it's naive to think that you can just be like, "Oh, well, we're gonna have diverse blah, blah, blah." Like, you really do have to pick the people that need to be in the room, and this is hopefully gonna relate to listening circles, but tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about the idea of who's in the room and how that
Oh,
relates to the work that you're doing.
yeah, yeah, it's so critical to get that mix right, and there are in every organization, whether it's, news related or not, there are people who, um, are caring for the work.
Mhm,
Like, they're linchpins, folks that know a lot about a certain area or a certain department, and so and then care, right? They're the people who go the extra mile to do things. And so in selecting, it was either this person has complained forever about this thing,
yep, so
so
it's
they
time
have
to
a
put
seat
up.
at the table. And they're like, "Yeah, now you get to do something so you can stop complaining." Or they've been trying to do this work by themselves on their own,
Mhm,
and to no avail, right? And then you just fill it up with other people who so, like, I always think about it as, a leadership building spot too. So I
mhm,
put leaders in place, people in place that I felt were unseen leaders. Like, they were leading in their own ways and spaces, but they could only be seen so much or so far up the food chain because the work doesn't necessarily touch that high up. But
mhm,
they were the ones that everybody was going to. So, like, I try to put them in a leadership position so that they can be seen and, because these committees are not the work, and so, like, you could be, a videographer who really leads in his space, but is not seen by, the managing editors, but you put him in charge of one of these divisions, one of these committees, and then he's interacting with those bosses at that high level, and they're like, "Oh, like that person really knows what they're like, they really understand the workings of our newsroom in a way that I didn't know."
mhm.
So, it was so that was also intentional, like, the leadership, making sure that people were seen that hadn't been seen before, giving them a chance to actually lead. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. Like,
You never hit
that's
100% of the shots, you know?
no, 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 but you have to take them. Like, "You've said you wanted to lead in this space, so we're gonna give you a chance," and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But, age diversity was huge. There's managers, middle managers, so, like, the how who's in the room to make the decisions was all sorts of people, and, um and so it leveled the playing field in terms of, like, the power dynamics,
Mhm,
which was also nice. Oh, yeah, the one group that I loved to death for a long time was the hiring committee because it was led by this guy, Josh Penrod, who is, like, exacting. He is always asking who's not represented in the room,
oh, great.
all sorts, so he was really good, and I needed him in that role because hiring was what I felt like was a mess. Um, because it was whoever the department head was just made the decision about who they were gonna hire. There were no, like, hiring committees, there was no nothing, like,
It was just
"Oh,
like, "I have a role to fill, and this is
I'm
the
gonna
right
fill it."
person," and that's it.
Yeah, "I see me's right, this person seems like, yeah, they went to the same school as I did, no problem," right?
Mhm,
And so there was a lot of bias, or there was just a lot of opaqueness about, especially if there were internal hires.
Mm-hmm.
Like, "Oh, did so and so a favor? Like, why did they get this job? Or was it really open? Is it closed? What does that look like?" So we got to really, like, hash out what's a promotion, and then what's a lateral move, and then, like, all of those things so that, and then deciding how we should go forward with a lot of so we redid the whole hiring system, which has been
Now,
great.
did anyone, along this journey kind of give you pushback? I'm just thinking HR in the back of my head, like, "Why do you have a hiring committee? We know how to hire. We do this really well." Like, what kind of internal pushbacks did you
Yeah.
get?
So, like, well, it was interesting. Like, the newsroom always took care of its own
Mhm.
hiring system, so HR really was just, um
Just making sure you're following the law and giving the handbook out?
right. They weren't doing anything really. They checked to make sure the posting was accurate and
Mhm.
put the posting up, take the posting down, whatever, right? Um, and so they had no um look into how we were hiring. And so just by having the hiring committee, we invited HR to be a part of it. And so that changed the dynamic of everything, too. So they actually we opened up the process enough so that HR could be more involved.
Okay.
In
Good
a
God.
way that right. In a way, because we had done all of this work and figured some things out, and we're like, "Hey, are you guys doing the same thing? This is what we're doing." And so it was actually a really good sharing of information. And by the work that we did in the newsroom, it changed how, um, some of the practices that HR had done.
Okay.
Just, like, updated some things because we had been talking to industry people and doing all this research. But yeah, like, but I mean, every single department was represented as a part of that hiring committee, and
Ooh, that's
so
a lot of
we could
cats in the room. I mean, like, you're herding a lot of cats.
yeah, but it was just like we would just come up with topics that we wanted to hit.
Mhm.
And then people were like, "Okay, this is how I feel about it," and then we would get to a consensus that actually moved like, people were mostly on the same page, which I found, like, "This is gnarly, like, should we think about this?" I think the pushback that we got mostly was, like, senior leadership was just like, "We're gonna do like, that seems like a lot of work, like, I don't know if I wanna do,
Mhm.
um" that sort of level of phone screens, then, um, committees that come in and look, um, and then give feedback to the like, they were just like, "This seems like it's gonna take a long time," and we're just like, "If done right, it shouldn't take any longer, and you should have a better process, and it should be complicated because we're talking about people's lives."
Mhm.
Um, and you wanna hire once, you
Right, right. You wanna make sure it's the really good fit. So, now, I feel like all these things are building blocks, you sort of practiced on your own community, your internal
Mhm.
community,
Yeah.
before events kind of pushed you externally. So before we go to the external and what happened with that,
Yeah.
a high and a low, the, like, biggest lessons learned from that
Oh,
internal
yeah.
working?
Um, oh, yeah. So, um, yeah, matching passions with the work is always the smartest thing to do because, people are motivated and continue. Like, after I left because I think there were 6 or 7 committees that I started in the newsroom,
Mm,
and 6 are still going.
that is
So
wait, how
that
long? So that's we're talking you're on your 4th or 5th year?
so yeah, so we're about the 5th year of those committees.
Yeah.
And so, uh, that seems healthy, like, and people are still doing the work and they're expanding what they're doing over time, which is great. Um, and, so I love that part. So, like, making sure that they're and making sure that, like, the staying power was really interesting, like, I'm I asked people to make sure that if they left the committee, that they replaced themselves.
Okay. So
So
it
that
couldn't just, like, dribble out.
Right, right, right. And so there, I mean, people did dribble out. I mean, that's just gonna
That's life, yeah.
happen.
Mhm,
But like, um, but that sort of that idea of bringing people along, and passing on that knowledge is a part of that, and I feel like that has part of the reason why it's been pretty good.
mhm,
Um, uh, the hardest part is the patience, um,
mhm,
because we're um, because the work comes first, because the journalism comes first.
mhm,
Things move really slowly
yeah,
in these committees, and so having the patience around um, that slowness,
mhm.
um, was really hard, hard to keep the folks motivated, the leaders motivated to keep going, but I had them meet, sort of regularly
Mhm.
so that they can feed off of each other and sort of support one another, and I think that's also important.
Well, I do
Um
think the pace of the news cycle is so quick that you're always it's just a total adrenaline rush
Mhm.
all the time. And then you come back in, you're like, we're gonna have a committee and we're gonna try and get to consensus. And consensus can take a while. And
Right.
you also want to thoughtfully consider these options. That's a naturally slowed down process. And
Mhm.
so you're kind of ricocheting from one extreme to another. So I could see how that would be, especially in the early days when you're not quite sure how it's gonna end up,
Yep.
that it can be a real risk, honestly.
Yeah, yeah,
So armed with your high and your low and,
yeah.
the crucible of the super skeptical newsroom, because that's a tough audience,
Oh, yeah.
tell me about the time that you were kind of flicked into the outer world when you went external. And
Yeah,
what did that look like? Because that's the genesis of these I think, that this is the genesis of those listening circles that we had talked about.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, that always has been the goal. Like, when you produce a project, um, I remember we years ago, we did this project on the bees and how bees were dying. And, great, great work by all involved. And I'm like, why aren't we discussing this with the communities? Like, why aren't we in the community talking about this instead of just like producing a thing and say, enjoy? Like, why
Enjoy
aren't
all
we
your bees
convening?
dying.
Right, 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 right. Enjoy learning some things instead of like really sort of working with community to actually talk through some of those issues in a real way. So I would just, this I think I was still a photographer then. And I was just like, can't we do why can't we go out, like we should just be at like the VFW in like, Fertile and then talking about these issues. And and so like I thought it would be, useful. And then sorry, like I
Oh,
fell
I get
down.
passionate and flail around and knock things over all the time. Well, and it just strikes me, I just got back from, Media Fest,
Mm,
SBJ's Media Fest, which was in DC, and so I was, popping into a session about, um, how to interview people and how to get people to open up, and
mhm,
the presenter was, I think Dean Nelson out in California, and what he was saying is that you need the 3 E's, the experts, the explainers, and the eyewitnesses. So, like, gathering the
mhm.
stakeholders, and so often, news media really relies on what tend to be really dry people, the experts
Right,
and the
right.
explainers, but you need to
Mhm.
talk to the people that issue is actually affecting. And that
Yep.
really seemed to be kind of at the crux of what had motivated you as a
Yeah.
photojournalist. You want to be at the VFW. It's not just for the cheap beer. It's
Right.
before, understanding how does this issue affect individuals in
Mhm.
whatever community you're in.
Yeah, like you have to go to the people, like, and in the talking to the people, you get the journalists with regular folks, they're gonna find more stories. Like,
Yes,
it
it
feels
works.
like a win-win, right? Like, I just didn't I never understood why we didn't go out and talk more. And, and so then Steve Grove came, and he went on his own listening tour, and
Mhm,
I'm like, "Okay," because he just wanted to find out what the state, and he was with, he was commissioner at Deed, um, so, he had to travel the state anyway, so he was used to doing that work,
mhm.
and I'm just like, "Thank the Lord." Like, I've been wanting to force you people to get out, and so,
So why don't
um
you think people do you think it's just fear or, like, you're in your routine? Because journalists are like
yeah,
nosy Nellies, they're super curious
of
people.
course.
Why do you think they're not going out and talking to those eyewitnesses, those stakeholders?
Yeah, I think there's the news cycle is, the to be able to put up fast, sometimes, phone it can be faster.
Mhm.
Um, and so those calls are, like, not leaving the office. I have such a problem with that. But also there's fear in, uh, like, then I have to get a story out of this,
Oh, that
right?
right,
So
it's a big deal. Every conversation is like,
every
okay, it has to
conversation
turn
is
out.
transactional, right?
Yeah.
And so that was my piece, like, I wanted to be able to create listening sessions where journalists can show up and not have to actually produce anything.
Mhm,
They can just be there to listen and to talk to people and to build sourcing instead of just I've gotta create something out of this.
mhm.
And so my thing has always been like, how do we show up in communities in a non-transactional way where we're not wanting to extract anything except for be in community and talk about things.
Right.
And so I witnessed Steve, like, he was just basically polling the state saying, "How are we doing? What can we do better?" And I thought that was interesting, but then I was just like talking to him and I said, we have to come up with this way of listening that is not just one and done. We have to continually be in the space of listening, and what does that look like?
Oh, I
And
love the
so,
systems perspective. I think
yeah,
that's a defining term for you.
yeah, yeah, because if it's not foundational, we will not do it. If it's a one-off, we will not do it.
Mhm,
And if we're partially listening, then we think we're the experts and we don't know, and then we screw stuff up.
mhm.
And so, like, um, and it's just like it's everything, right? Like, it's listening for better stories, listening for context in stories. So, like, the quality of the stories that you're creating have deeper, more rich and impact because you've done some listening. Um, and so you'll also have more stories, but they know who you are.
Mhm,
And folks will have uh like so what I think is that folks will do um like, folks will listen, and be able to, like, understand and have when you have relationships with people, um, there's a less of a chance of them demonizing you.
absolutely. Right, they trust you, they know you a little bit
Right.
more.
And so, like, the system of listening allows there to be relationship, and with that relationship comes trust.
Mhm,
And so, like, we're at a trust deficit in the media business right now,
mhm.
and, like, this is the way, um, like, I I think about this as when I was a photo editor, and, uh, my desk was kind of far away from where the, photographers were, and so I would come back into the photography area, and people would start, like,
Oh, yeah, "Why is she here? Oh my gosh, I'm
"Hey,
here."
she may wanna send me out to something, I don't wanna go to it." And so, like, I would have to announce, I'm like, "I want nothing from you. I just wanna see how you're doing." And they're like, "Oh, oh, okay." And then they would chat. And so, like, that's the same thing, like, people are avoiding us because they don't know us.
Mhm.
And so, like, we need to show up in communities so that people just get to know who we are.
Right. And
And
I think it goes both ways. You were talking about how journalists don't like to go out because it creates that transaction. Sources don't like to see you coming because they know you're gonna ask about the worst day of their life,
right,
like, all the
right.
time. And
Yeah.
nobody really wants to rehash that time and time again, especially
Oh,
to a
no.
virtual stranger who's gonna publish it.
I know,
So,
I
like,
know.
it all makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
So walk me through. So Steve
yeah,
obviously was on board with the idea of the listening circles because it
yeah.
happened. So walk me through how you set it up and what you did, and then we can talk about the effect.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was really interesting. So, we decided, we want to do better about the state. So we picked 6 city centers as our the first year. And so the format was like we're basically reintroducing ourselves to the state.
Mhm.
Like, here's who we are, here's who we're about. We had just rebranded, so it was easier to sort of do that piece too.
And just to
And
interject, you're the Minneapolis Star Tribune. You were not conceptualized in the Wayback Machine as a statewide
right,
publication.
right,
So, like, in some ways, it's not a reintroduction, it's a straight introduction for some
right.
corners of the state, probably.
Correct, correct, correct. And so like for us we had so the format is that we wanted to um have some community leaders be interviewed by one of the local journalists, um and it was like we wanted to be able to talk about their community in a real way. So tell us what's working and what's not. And so we had these like, either mayor or city council or whoever,
All the big
um,
names. Mhm,
all the big names, people. So we'd have like 3 or 4 people on stage, the reporter who covers that area be there. And so they would just start a conversation. And so they would lead the conversation with some ideas. And then uh and then we set it out to the groups. And so uh the community that showed up, and we had 50 or less folks in the room, and they're all set up in tables, and we had somebody from the Star Tribune at each table.
mhm.
And so they were able to ask some questions of the panelists about their community or say things that they wanted to. But in these small groups at these small tables, they were able to really like um, answer these 2 questions. What does media get wrong about the place that you live? Like,
Mhm.
what do we just not understand? And then what does the rest of the state need to know about your city or your town?
Hmm.
And so with those 2 questions, people had really lively discussions, and there would be a Star Tribune person taking notes. And at the end, we give it about 15 or so minutes for share outs. Like, what were people talking about at the table? What
Mhm.
was really resonant? And um, and so we took those notes and brought them back, and it was really good.
I think it's so interesting to ask, what do we get wrong? Because that's a courageous question to ask,
Yeah,
when you're the only reporter sitting at a table of whatever, and you're not quite sure what the answer is gonna be. And
yeah,
also, what do you wanna share with the world? So, because that's not like, "Tell us what's good about your community or what's bad about you." It's not, um, uh, oppositional in that way, but
yeah, yeah,
it's deeper than that. So, I
yeah.
before
Like,
and
what
I
do
wanna
they need
hear
to
what.
know? Yeah,
Yeah. Who
yeah.
came to those sessions? Did you just kinda do an all call and people that were just showed up?
Oh, no, they were curated.
Okay. So just
Also,
like you
right?
curated your committees, you
Yeah.
curated it wasn't just the
I
mayor and city
curated the
council.
public yeah, the public space. The interesting thing about, um, this work with the communities was that they really, um I'm trying to think, it was like you really wanted them to be able to have, like, a rich discussion. Like,
Mhm,
that was the whole purpose, and so you had to kinda curate it. So what we would do is that, okay, they're the 1 or 2 reporters or the state reporters that sort of cover this community. And so we asked them, okay, who would you like to have in the room? Like, what
yeah,
sources or or people that you've been really interested in? So they gave us names, and we sent that out. Um, the panelists, we also asked them to use their networks and invite people.
mhm,
And then so we had at some point and then what we did, so we did people we knew or wanted to know better, for both the panelists and the reporters. Then, we sent out, notices to subscribers in that area to say
Mm,
like, "Hey, this is a thing that you could be a part of." And then at some point, like maybe a week before or a few days before, we would advertise it and open it up to the public.
okay.
So most of the seats would be taken by people who are really wanting to engage.
Right,
And
so it's not
so
it wasn't like, "Hey, we'll have unlimited seats." You had 50
no,
slots, and when they're gone, they're gone.
they're gone, they're gone. Right, right. So like at the end we were selling out,
Mhm.
which was nice to be able to say, "Oh, we're sold out." But if they showed up, they could come.
If anyone's gonna bestir themselves to come at, like, 6 p.m. on a weeknight, I
Yeah,
always feel like
we
let them
they
in.
need to come. They need to come. But yeah, so there's a curated audience, curated people who were from the Star Tribune. So like one of the cities was Rochester where Mayo is. And
Mhm.
so we had the health and science reporter go because he does a lot of work in that community and it would be good for him. And so, he got to and sometimes it's just like some of the folks that we got to come, like he was having a hard time getting a hold of. And so like
Oh,
it
so
really
it works
worked.
for everybody, yeah.
Right, right, right. And so that part is, I mean, it's important, right? Um and so we did that hard listening
Was there anything that
through
you heard that surprised you or scared you or made you sad?
um uh this thing that surprised me was, well, it shouldn't have surprised me, but just like no matter where we were, like affordable housing, childcare.
Those are universal issues. Yeah,
And just like it was just
sometimes you
like
get surprised about how universal a universal issue is.
right, 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 and it's just like and I was surprised by how, like, in the last 2 years, like, what solutions people came up with things. Um, the sad part is just, like, uh, the most frustrating part the first year and the year that Steve went around was, like, people would say, "I really wish you guys would write stories about this." And I'm like, "We have." We we have totally done that, and,
Mhm.
it was kind of insane, like, numerous paper I'm like, "Oh, no." They're like, "Oh, yeah, the traffic's really bad here, and, this construction over here, and, yeah, wish you guys would have written a story about it," and I was like, "Toot, toot, toot. Here it
Here
is."
you go. Well,
And
yeah,
it's yeah, I mean, it was just, like, it was super telling that we weren't reaching people
right.
in the way that we should have.
Yeah.
Like, she should not know that we didn't write a story about that. Like, if she is searching for that information, she should be able to see us, and we needed to figure out what that meant.
Yeah, I mean, is that more of a function of like, okay, you're not in the channels that where people are looking for you, or like you're not their go-to spot? Um,
Right?
so I think that
All those things.
and that's because you're pouring out your heart and your love, even in a traffic report, um,
Yeah.
to the community. And when they're not picking up what you're putting down, like, it's sort of like if the paper doesn't hit its deadline, does it matter how well the stories are written if nobody's seeing them? So
Right.
I think that's that real tension, and sometimes you have to think about, okay, how can we meet people where they are? And I think that was the crux of those listening sessions. So
Yeah, yeah. And
what did
just
you
build
do?
relationships.
Mhm.
Like like, if you are if if you see me and know my name, then I'm more likely to, like, look at the stuff that you put out.
Right.
So if I build a relationship with somebody and they're like, "Hey, that person was really cool. Hey, I wonder what stories they read," or, there's like, "Oh, they usually cover this stuff. Well, I'm gonna look for their name." So instead of just searching for random stuff, they'll search for whatever they're interested in and that person's name. and
Yeah,
that's just different.
right. Because you are building that personal relationship. So
Yeah.
now, was this? I know you're not into one and done, and your committees at the publication at the newsroom are entering their fifth year. What was the sort of cycle like for the listening circles? Was that, you know,
Oh,
your sixth tour and then you're set? Or
oh, no, so we went and did the 6 cities first, for the first year, and then this last year, we did 14.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you were going now, and I can't pretend to know a lot about Minnesota, cities and municipalities, but,
Yeah.
it feels like if you're doing 14, you're kinda getting into much smaller spaces. So,
Yeah, yeah.
was there like, a difference in those small towns versus bigger cities?
Yeah, yeah, and how people showed up, what pride looked like in terms of their towns,
Mm,
distinction between county and the cities that were around that or the towns that were around that county. You know, just in, like, common language and understanding, there were some differences. Yeah,
mhm.
we did, a northern tour and then a southern tour, and, uh and the thing that also surprised me was just how grateful people were just like, "I can't believe you came to my town."
Ah. Yeah, if you have to
Right?
like, if you wanna go see a show and you have to drive 3 hours, maybe you start to think like, "Alright, nobody's coming to my town." So, yes,
Right.
like but physically, like, feeling seen and looking at people in context, I think is so
Mhm.
incredibly powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it was quite amazing. We went to, and we did some of the listening, tours at, colleges, small colleges too, and
Mhm.
I feel like that was a good, there's some tweaks I wanna do to that, but that's a good situation, um, to be, and just in terms of space and they're used to having sort of bigger crowds
Right.
for things, and so, and, like, uh, what we learned from year 1 to year 2 was that, um we wanted to have like, the southern tour was 1 week, and we had 3 days where we're hitting all of these different cities, like, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening,
Mhm.
and that worked out really well, and I figured, like, there's one that had 4 in a day. I can't
Oh,
remember.
that's a
Anyway,
lot. Mhm.
yeah, it was a lot. But, like, we hit smaller cities in between the bigger cities.
Okay.
And so that felt like we were not wasting our time, that we were, like, really being intentional about all of these spaces. And, and this year was different, that we weren't just necessarily asking them about us or about how they felt about themselves, but we were, each reporter who sort of covered that area thought of a topic that
I
was
was gonna
really
ask,
sort of
yeah.
central. Yeah,
Mhm.
really central to what, like, the question of the day for this community is. And, like, the one in Marshall was interesting because it was just, like, how tariffs were gonna affect the local farming.
Mhm.
Um, and so they had some folks who, some public officials, and then they had, like, the ag people at the school have some conversation. And so there was a really a good, um uh, talking points around things. And so this time we didn't actually break it down to the small tables and have that conversation. It was more of like the groups were, the community members were asking questions of, the panelists, and it was sort of a more back and forth. And then at
Mhm.
the end, as a whole group, we were asking, like, what can we do to be better, and,
Mhm.
asking more specific questions about, what stories are we missing?
Mhm.
And,
Yeah, that feels a little bit more town hall, is that am I getting that right?
yeah, it's a little bit more like a town hall situation, and I think that part is good, as long as the group is small enough, and it seemed to work out okay. Like, the topics I felt was, like, right on the money,
Mhm.
and the people who left felt like they got something out of it.
Yeah.
And,
Did you do
um
surveying or anything? Like, how do you know when people left, they felt like they got something out of it. So what's that
Um,
follow-up look like? Is that
oh, oh yeah, like, so follow up in the at the place. So like we
Mhm.
were asking like how did it go? So one-on-one sort of asking some questions and people were like, "Oh my god, thank you so much for doing
Oh,
this."
good.
Like, we got to meet some people like I had these questions and so this was great. So that part was really actually done really well. And then uh uh so we also sent them a thank you letter at the end, so you had to register um and to attend. And then so we had the emails and so we sent out surveys afterwards
Mhm,
to collect that data as well. And like in the end, like I feel like what I learned is that there's a lot of qualitative data that we got from there
mhm,
that you can put into chat and get some real sort of insights through some of that work. And so like between the surveys that go out via email and for polling and taking notes in um like at the venue, having that's sort of like the just of the like qualitative data. And then the next step that I've been thinking about in terms of how these roll out is just like um when do there's a the how do we take the quantitative data that we have about these communities and the qualitative data, like you say you want these stories,
mhm,
right? This is the what I'm interested in, or this is what I've been thinking about. But the data shows that your community is actually not doing or looking at that. Is there
uh-huh.
a way to sort of figure out? So there's something there between
It's like a gap
qualitative and quantitative.
analysis.
Yeah, yeah, and sort of trying to figure that out. Or is there a time where we go back to those communities and show them, like you say these things, and this is how your community is reading news
Mhm.
and digesting it, and this is what you guys are looking at, and so having a discussion on that. Does that make sense? I don't know. Anyway,
Well, and actually, I'm really interested also in sort of, and I love what you've done in terms of curating that community space because there are a lot of people that don't engage with the news at all.
yeah, yeah,
So when you take that sort of broad lens and say who should be in the room, I think it's really important to make sure you're having people who aren't, yes, you invite subscribers and all sorts of people, but making sure you're looking at community members regardless of whether they're reading your news content or maybe
correct.
they're in the WhatsApp app group or maybe they're
Mhm,
they're listening to TV and radio. So I think it come to me, it's more about civic engagement and really
correct.
weaving the publication into the fabric of the community and I love that you use community spaces to do that.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and so just like the committees had a material effect on the publication,
yeah.
what have you changed based on the listening circles?
Yeah, I think we've changed our relationship to like, I think we've made it okay to listen
Mm,
in all sorts of interesting ways. Sometimes people just need permission.
mhm,
And so, like, if you're I think the, um, part of it is, like, Steve had gone on his, we had done one, and then, so we did this podcast series called The Ghost of a Chance. And, in that, the producers of that podcast, um, it's about how this reporter, Eric Roper, lives in this house, that was once owned by Harriet and Clementine Robinson.
hmm,
And they were this black couple in the neighborhood that Eric lives in is very white. And so it was owned by this black couple in 1917.
mm. That's
And
unusual. Okay.
right, right. So he was just like, "Huh." So he being the fantastic OCD reporter he is, like he like found who they are, like where they were born, like their entire history up until when they passed away.
Oh, that's
And so we
fascinating.
wound up yeah, and so we did a podcast series on it, but it was just like, okay, so we have all the people who are producing content with this are white. And they noticed that they were, and said that, "How can we do this story well if we don't have anybody who represents this community, as a part of it?" And so, they thought, "Well, we've done listening sessions before, like, why can't we just do a listening session in the community that she used to live in?" And
Oh, I
so
love that it's now a tool that you can use for actual reporting.
actual reporting. So, and just in terms of tone, they went to, like, we had maybe 3 or 4 different listening sessions, one with some younger people, one with, like, the church that she was a part of and
Mm,
elders, and, one in this other, like, community, center, and invited people to come. And, so we would tell their story, and then sometimes have audio clips for them to listen to,
mhm.
and to say, like, "We were wondering, does this resonate with you? Does this make sense? Like, are we heading
Oh,
in the
like a
right
gut check.
direction?"
Okay, yeah.
And so, like, there were concerns, like, at some point, um, they were these sort of high society couple. They would have people, all sorts of famous people through their house and hosting.
Oh, interesting.
And, so but they never had kids, right?
Oh,
And, so Eric winds up finding in records that, Clementine had filed for divorce at some point. She didn't go through with it, but she had filed.
oh. Wow, that's a
And
big
it
deal. That's a story right there because that doesn't
r
happen.
Right, right. And so, like, he thought, and there was abuse in it, right? Like,
Ooh,
he was drinking, and so he was just like, "I think the podcast is killed because I have to say what happened, but I don't wanna perpetuate these stereotypes of black men."
right.
And so he asked some people, and he asked some, like, trauma-informed, folks, and they were just like, "No, that makes sense," right? Like, that he would have a drinking problem for all of these reasons of, like, he was a valedictorian. He lived in Indiana. It was a valedictorian of his high school, a mixed high school, and every person who was the top of their class got a free scholarship to law school.
Oh, except for the
Except
black
for
one.
him.
Yeah. I'd be drinking too. I mean, like,
I'd
yeah,
be
but
drinking too. Yeah,
right.
yeah, so, he owned a chicken shack, he was a, like, waiter or pullman for, so, like, not a
All
lawyer,
honorable work, but not
not a
tracking
lawyer, not a
what he
lawyer.
should have been able to
Right,
do. And y
right, right.
but I think that's a really interesting way to kind of, like, get into those societal issues without being this, like and but I love the idea of being able to convene a listening session and just
Mhm.
recognize, "Okay, who's not in the room? Whose voice is not here that we need?" I
Right.
think that's a really powerful shift. So
Yeah, I think it's the piece that, like, we can't be, like, we don't hold all the answers, and
mm.
we can't know everything. And so being humble and showing up and saying, like, "I need help making sure that I get this right, that it feels like you. It feels like the community, and, like, the community in sort of um, full thought," right? Um,
So this feels like a paradigmatic shift for news media, who has traditionally been a gatekeeper, as
huh,
opposed to you and I met at the American Press Institute local news summit, where they talked about news media as a caretaker of a
yeah,
public space, and so I'm interested as I think news media kind of struggles with this shift of being
yes,
relational and being honestly afraid about, you know, being overwhelmed by maybe this need or like, well, we can't give our our power to these people, to the
right,
public.
right.
They might want to only know about this and we think they should know about that. Um, are you seeing other newsrooms do this kind of work or do you feel like you're kind of alone, not alone, but a pioneer in this.
Yeah, I think everybody is sort of slightly dipping their toe into this work. Like they're trying to do some listening, but they're kind of awkward at it, or they're trying to convene spaces where people can talk, but are uncertain. I
Mhm.
think everybody's trying. They know. I think the industry knows that they lost a battle with relevancy.
Yeah,
I mean, we 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 just assumed that they would just keep on coming back,
right.
and, that was the wrong assumption, and so now we are scrambling to be relevant in a sea of crazy noise,
Mhm,
and, that we are worth your time and your money,
mhm,
um, to so that you feel like you know what's going on in your community. And or that community is a valuable thing, right?
right.
And look what you gain when you're in community with each other. And so like how we show up in those spaces like we're just starting to understand, just making partnerships with local community members, and that worry about partisanship.
Mhm,
And am I going to be, I can't be in bed with this person because, so and so on the left or the right are going to be mad at me. And how do you convene a space that doesn't have that sort of um a polarization in it,
mhm.
that allows people to see themselves as community members is, like, is the trick of the moment, because you
In
can
some
feed
way,
into it.
does it feel like it's harkening back to, like, a really, in some ways, traditional aspect of news media as the convener, as the
Hmm.
town square, as sort of the level field for everyone to participate? Like, in
Yeah.
some ways, you're kicking it old school,
Oh yeah.
um,
Yeah.
in just new and interesting formats. So, I wanna know what's next and then some closing thoughts.
Yeah, so next, so after 25 years at the Star Tribune, that's a long
That is a
time.
l
So it's a while. Like, so I'm, leaving at the end of the year to do my own, consulting business called, um, Infinite Voices,
So
and so my
January 2026, Infinite
yes,
Voices,
it's
hanging out the shingle.
That's
Okay.
right, that's right, that's right. And, this convening work, this work of, like, building systems, building structures around, the spaces in between us,
Mhm,
is the part that I'm super excited to do. Like, I loved working at the Star Tribune. Um, it is my home, these are my people, but I've been pouring a lot of who I am and sort of the structure and infrastructure that I'm wanting to build into one place.
mhm,
And I'm feeling like instead of trying to start this one big fire in one place, it would be fantastic if I can start a bunch of little fires all over the place. And so just really giving people the tools and the understanding to, um, make their own convening spaces in
mhm,
their places, like, yeah, like, who doesn't want that? I want us to be more connected and, connected to the communities that we serve, and do that authentically, and, they just, they're so news organizations are so busy. It's really hard for them to see, like, to come up out of their hole to see what's going on out
yeah,
there. So that's the reason why I'm like, "Oh, I like having this job because I can fill gaps."
mhm,
And so my hope is that I can build systems that allow for to be a gap filler, and then people will, um, they will create their own system of working, that feels like them, and, I don't know, just be able to be just be better. Just be
Yeah.
better. That's all I want.
Well, right. Well, and to connect with communities in organic ways. And I think,
Yeah.
I love how you've taken this idea and created a replicable system, like it's a very
Yeah.
scientific way to go about it,
Yeah.
and had it in the crucible of the newsroom. And then you moved it to your community and
Mhm.
tested it and refined it. And now, like that structure that's not prescriptive on you have to talk to these people or like, find three religious leaders, two politicians,
Oh my
and
god,
three,
no.
like it's not like that, but understanding for this space who needs to be in the conversation, who
Yeah,
needs to
yeah,
be
yeah.
in community together. And I think that's so incredibly powerful. And I have loved our conversation.
This has
What
been
do you
fun.
well, and I want to ask you, so my closing question for you is what's based on your work over the past couple years, what
Mhm.
is one thing you want a journalist to take away from this conversation? Something that
Oh.
a journalist could do like right now. They don't have to wait for your system. They don't have to wait for
No, they
infinite
don't.
voices to come down. What can they do?
No, like, every single journalist should have a day a week, a day every 2 weeks, where you are just going out into the community and having coffee with someone.
Mm,
And it's just like, for interns, it would be great or, Kenny Irby, who, was a longtime, Pointer guy, works with the, Tampa Bay police,
mhm,
folks, and he would have young, police officers come back with 5 business cards, 5 names. 5 names every I forgot, it was 2 weeks, every month, 5 names of
mhm,
people that they met and spent time with. And so, like, if journalists can set up some time to where, like, they are just collecting a certain amount of names of people that they just spend time with in different communities that they're serving. Not for looking for a story, but, like, they're interesting or they're connected in some way to this community that, like, I wanna know more about, like, allowing journalists' natural curiosity to lead them to other things, but, like, carve out that time, demand that time
mhm.
to build those relationships, and anybody can do that.
Yeah. Now, I think that is a great idea. I hope that our listeners implement that. And
Yeah.
I want to hear from you again when you're a little bit farther along in your work. But thank you so much for spending the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, of course, it was fun. Thanks for
Great.
having me.
Sure.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, at mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.